Hello and welcome to Upside, where every week we look behind the headlines affecting European venture. Today we've got a glorious full house. It is Mads, myself, Lomax and Andrew. And it's our 100th episode, so we're doing something slightly different. We released episode 1 2 years ago this week, the day after the Butler assassination attempt, the day of the Euro 2024 final, and 10 days into the Starmer government. So what we're going to do in this episode is take a look back over those years, compare them to what's happening in today in our ecosystem, and then try to play out the next two. So let's go. Gentlemen, Lomax, you're with us. Andrew, you've been a ghost and a stranger. What is new with you? Tell us stories.
Oh, just out and about, raising our fund, chilling out in Portugal, where it's been cooler than London for most of the time, while you guys are fry, or those of you in London. But yeah, just busy, lots of portfolio, busyness running up to summer, actually. Lots of closing rounds.
Lovely, lovely. Lomax, what's the latest? Give us the juice.
All is good, man. All is great. Just first closed, just did our first deal out of the new fund. Wrapped up deployment of the original fund.
Exciting.
Put it very much off to the races. Had a bunch of people in our office this week, feeling great about that. And yeah,
it's a lovely spot. Good. It's a lovely place to be.
DB. Yeah, it was great to have you here.
Well, we had to do it. We're 100 episodes in and we've not been. So, it was bloody late in the day, but it's such a lovely, energizing spot to be. I know you'll take it for granted now, but it's just a super place to be. So if you are in Lisbon, you must go down and see the outsized office.
Come to the outside office, and actually next time, you've inspired me. We're now gonna, this office we love, but the office on the actual ocean view is the next step. Yeah. So
I know we're now pushing into the turf where people are going to want to throw things at the screen, going, "Don't these guys do any bloody work? And how bloody dare they?" But yeah, there is for those that don't, Andrew, you'll know because you're there. But there's this incredible little kind of, it's not a pier, but it's like this kind of outcrop of on the beach. Where are these restaurants, which is just would be an amazing spot to have an office. So I hope that comes off, and I'll be down, and we'll record another episode down there.
Thank you.
Mads, you're traveling Wilbury as well. Where are you? What's happening? What's the latest?
Well, I'm in Denmark right now, enjoying summer here. Still smarting a little bit following the match on Wednesday, or maybe we're not supposed to talk about
the football.
No, we're not supposed to.
Don't talk about the football. No, not having it. Not having it.
Okay, I will cancel that.
Well, listen, we got to the semi-finals. Say what you want. England has been amazing for the best part of 10 years. So I'm gonna go with that. Is that fair?
Is that the upside?
Yeah, there you go. Living
it was
the
a very
brand,
difficult week here because obviously my business partner is Argentinian, right? So it's been a high tension in the office.
Are you still partners?
It took me about 12 hours before I could congratulate him. I had to go and cool off for a while.
I'm not even a big football fan, but I was stood on the way home outside a pub for the last 30 minutes, having seen on the train home us score a goal thing and boom. And then we start defending and it all starts falling apart horribly. And then I'm stood outside this pub with 50 other people peering through a window, watching everything fall apart.
So I was watching the game in an outdoor kiosk in Lisbon, and they told me to take my own foldable chair because they run out of chairs. So I did that, and then once the second goal went in, I was like, I'm going home.
That's it.
So I must have cut a very forlorn figure as I, in my Beckham shirt, England shirt, traipsed
well, you didn't take
across
it off.
the streets of London, dragging this chair to go home. It's definitely my low point of 2026 so far.
Oh, bless you. Well, there's always another 4 years and 65 years it'll come home, or however the song goes.
Euro 2028, baby.
England hasn't won a major tournament for 60 years. Denmark won a major tournament 30 years ago.
1992.
Exactly. So do better than us.
Maybe in my children's lifetime. Right, let's move on. I'm going to do a little bit of a quick news update, and then we're going to get into the main docket, which is basically what's happened over the last 2 years, and then how we compare, and then how we're going to look forwards at the next two. But on the quick news front, I wanted to just highlight EU Inc. They've been busy with their legal department. They're looking to get effectively 5 non-negotiable items into European law by the end of this year. EU Inc. is a volunteer-driven group of guys and girls doing an incredible job at trying to basically push for a pan-European standard and business entity. So much like the US has the federal piece and then the state piece. They're trying to build for business, the federal, the more group, the overlay, which I think is really, really important. And the 5 non-negotiables they're pushing for are free choice of registered office, 1 central EU registry, access for all companies, standardized stock options with local labor law and taxes. So that's the 5 non-negotiables they're pushing for. And we'll know by the end of this year how that's going to pan out and what's going to happen with that. So I wish them every success. Other big news, Fable 5 is now going to be metered. Mira Murati's thinking machines released their first model. I don't know, has anybody played with the new model yet? Mads, you must have done.
Not yet.
Well, listen, you're out in the sticks, so maybe not. But it's a 975 billion parameter, broad, balanced foundational model. I love their naming conventions. So they've called it Inkling, and the tuning toolkit is called Tinker. I think that's kind of cool. Uber is looking to buy Delivery Hero over in Germany, valuing them at 15 bill. Merz, I don't know if you guys saw this, but in Germany, Merz is looking or warming up to the fact to go a little bit more into a potential trade war with the Chinese over cheap Chinese imports. We saw 200 economists sign an open letter titled, "We Must Act Now on AI and Jobs." We'll see what happens with that. Yan LeCun set up a fund and then hit the kill switch in about 10 seconds, returning all capital to LPs.
What an absolute shit show.
I'm assuming it's because he's got conflicts of interest. I couldn't quite work out what the real story, but it looks like he's got so many other conflicts of interest with other funds that he couldn't set up his own. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was the same. He killed it. Yeah.
That looked. I was like, oh great, what an interesting thing, and then boom, gone. And also, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this one, but lots of stories I felt this week were kind of baked in fear, and from people I wouldn't expect to hear these kind of stories from. But there was lots of doomer stories, and we're going to talk about a few of those later in the show. Lomax, anything else caught your eye this week that you'd highlight?
Well, I think literally live as we speak, tech stocks are being routed, right? So I think this is all
we're recording
overnight.
Friday 17th. We are, just for context.
NASDAQ composite lost 1.5% yesterday. TSMC, for example, in semicon is down 7%. Just this morning, Japan's tech-heavy Nikkei 225 index is down 4%. So that is a combination, I guess, of Iran and a lot of this memory and people thinking that we've got over our skis on memory in particular. So we'll probably talk about that later in the show. But I think as we speak now, things are getting a bit choppy.
Yeah, there's a lot of volatility. Andrew, anything that you would highlight or add or change?
No, just the pace of deals has been going strong. Lots of AI deals still. I think we're seeing some more interesting foundational tech AI related being funded in Europe. We'll talk about some of those deals later on. So things trending the right direction.
I would also add that there's been a very exciting exit this week in European terms. So Eli Lilly has agreed terms to buy Atai Beckley for up to $3 billion. So as a reminder, Atai Beckley is one of the leading listed companies leading companies generally in psychedelics, this new era of using psychedelic medicine for mental health, which is becoming more and more of a thing on the basis that you remember lots of money went into this sector 2021, 2020. We're now seeing the fruits of that capital because the clinical trials are now being read out, and actually they're very, very positive results, particularly
you've always said this, Lomax, haven't you? You've always said that there's going to be like a bit of a pregnant pause or a bit of inertia until we start seeing the results.
Well, and this is basically a great example because you've got Eli Lilly, one of the biggest pharma companies in the world, buying for up to 3.8 billion, like this company, Atai Beckley. And actually the asset they're most interested in is a nasal spray that uses, I think it's EME5 DMT, which effectively is the psychoactive compound in ayahuasca, right? You probably heard about ayahuasca ceremonies from exited founders who had too much time on their hands and have, jollied off to South America. But
it's what Mark Andreesen blames for kind of losing good founders to
it's what my friends
ceremonies
would call like licking the back of a frog or something. But actually, interestingly, it's DMT is the active compound in this nasal spray. It's shown incredible efficacy in treatment-resistant depression, right? So where you failed in the first like frontline treatments, like first 2 treatments, and it hasn't cured your depression. Interestingly, so J&J, another big pharma company, have a ketamine nasal spray called Spravato, which is now a massive blockbuster drug. You know,
But they just need to change the naming conventions, don't they? Because people are so resistant to things that they think are illegal or naughty or a little bit woo and a little bit way.
Well, Spravato is the name of this ketamine nasal spray, which does need to be administered alongside a nurse. It's not something you can just take home and shove up your nose. But that's going to be a $5 billion annual sales drug in the next couple of years, right? This actually is Eli Lilly's kind of fast follower in the same space, because this drug will also be a nasal spray. It uses a different psychoactive compound, but it's also targeting treatment-resistant depression. So the big point about this is actually a pretty important week for that whole sector. And by the way, we're not just talking about a niche thing. We're talking about mental health, which increasingly is becoming like one of the biggest burdens for health systems around the world.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg should have shares, shouldn't he, really?
Not only that, there've basically been no new medicines in mental health for the last 20, 30 years, right? Do you know what I mean? So it's an incredibly important thing. And actually this year, I think, so the FDA there will be the first FDA approved drugs in this category in the next 12, 18 months. So, and this is the kind of sign that this is coming down the pipe. So it's a big week in biotech, I say, but also this is a European story. We want the upside. This is a European company. So exciting times.
Before we move into the main chunk of the show, a quick earnings pulse check. The AI trade delivered records on both sides of the ledger this week. We saw the strongest demand signals yet from chips from ASML, TSMC, plus on Wall Street, and also the clearest casualties in IBM and, as Lomax, you were talking about, Korea's memory complex over the way. Mainly Samsung and SK Hynix taking the hit. So Mads, tee this one up. We've got ASML, TSMC said the spend is accelerating, IBM missing earnings. It looks like Trad Tech is being kicked in the nuts. What's actually going on here?
Yeah, I mean, going down the stack to kind of some of the infrastructure companies and below, right? TSMC making all the semiconductors, ASML making all the equipment that makes the semiconductors, right? Supplying the whole supply chain, TSMC first amongst them. And they both had fabulous announcements, ASML bookings saying that they have bookings into 2028. TSMC is getting a 40% growth. They're saying they're raising CapEx to more than 4 billion. So that's just them buying equipment to make semiconductors for customers. TSMC is saying that the next 3 years CapEx will be significantly higher than the last 3. So all people in the supply chain are saying is all we can see, as far as the eye can see, is growth, growth, growth. And then, of course, you're talking about memory at the same time. And yeah, memory has gone up a lot, but it's still cheap on fundamentals. And I think fundamentally it's simply just because it's so cyclical. It always ends in tears. And people are looking at it and saying, this can't possibly go on. If it does go on, the stocks are cheap, right? And one of the things that's come out of the market is, look, we've seen record earnings, but the market has just stopped paying for them. SK Hynix, they're saying there's a shortage of memory past 2030.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they, Mads?
Well, you could say they would say that, but at the same time, they also don't really have a reason as such to pump it up, because if they pump it up, all that's going to happen is it's going to totally blow up. So that's based on what they can see right now. So everybody in the supply chain, in that buying chain, is still very much in growth mode. And I think there's just a little bit of disbelief in the market, sort of saying, look, the wheel is going to come off at some point. They always do. It's kind of the laws of physics. IBM, on the other hand, they had a really, really tough week. Worst day since, I think, 1972, which is
25% hit, wasn't it?
25% hit. And they launched a new version of the mainframe last quarter. It seems odd because mainframe is sort of a 1960s era technology, right? It was sort of really hit by the time of the first moon landings back in the day. But they're still running massive amounts of workloads and travel and finance, et cetera. And it's hard to get off them. There was an expectation on the back of the new equipment that there would be revenue, kind of fairly strong revenue and sales in the quarter. That didn't happen. They came in below their own guidance and below their own forecast. They blame it on execution, but the market is really saying, look, what's happening here is that companies, the big enterprise customers, are shifting spend away from mainframe hardware to AI. And of course, underneath it all, there is an expectation that AI can be used to migrate some of the workloads off mainframes onto much cheaper platforms. So on one hand, you could say, yes, how could this happen now? On the other hand, it's pretty remarkable that we have a technology that's 50 years old that's still running such a big part of the global workload.
Feels like an accelerating force. It feels like this might be a continuing story. Or do you think IBM is going to recover?
100%. Listen, I don't think it's not going to go away overnight, but absolutely there is a level of acceleration here. It's a lot quicker for some, right? We saw Sun Microsystems and EMC that disappeared fairly quickly. IBM is obviously far more entrenched, but it's just you're juxtaposing the two things. You have the total demand, massive wall of demand on the AI and the GPU side, and then you have a sort of a shortage of demand, you could say, on the mainframe and the legacy.
Do you
tech
feel
side.
any loyalty?
At least mainframes don't hallucinate, though.
Oh, come on, you misery.
You don't want your ATM hallucinating the amount of money it's given you, right?
Well, I wouldn't mind if it was going up. But Matt, do you feel any loyalty or any warmth? Do you feel any connection to IBM? Because you and I, that was your kind of first stomping ground, wasn't it, back in the day?
Look, I think it's a company that had it all, and I think it's a company that could have really controlled a lot of the sectors we're in. We were very early with cloud computing, right, and just didn't lean in, didn't invest in it. Very early with AI. I mean, the Kasparov and Deep Blue was super exciting. The Jeopardy and Watson was super exciting. And I think there was a combination of maybe some of the wrong tech bets for me, but actually I think it was more sort of some of the courage to invest at times when they could have been investing. The company was fairly run by the finance department, just sort of saying, look, everything is going to pay back within a quarter.
It's got to be just such a big behemoth of a super tanker to move. I can't imagine.
Yeah, but you're seeing it in other firms today. Google's been caught flat-footed now twice in 3 years. Once you get that in position of incumbency, it's hard to keep up. And that's why
I reckon they're going to win. We'll talk about this later, but I reckon Google and Apple are going to win. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you, Mads. Carry on.
No, not at all. I think it's been said. Look, I think it's got a storied legacy. I still think what happened around the moon landings was incredible, right? Gene Kranz, who was the mission control coordinator for the Apollo mission at the time, said we could have never landed on the moon without IBM. Yeah. And it's not many tech companies that are in a position where they're so important for something so important for mankind.
1969, though, right? I mean, this is the.
But then you have Kasparov over Deep Blue, and you have Watson. You have some of those technology milestones that were phenomenal. At the time I worked there, we had 5 Nobel laureates on staff. Yeah. Right. So these things change. Yes, I always think there was a lot of legacy, and the company could have continued if some of those wrong decisions hadn't been made. But
could have been. Lomaxius, tell us. Korea had its 7th worst day on record, driven by memory. Bear market, buying opportunity. What's the shtick over there?
Yeah, it's worth stepping back a little bit to think about what's gone on in the Korean stock market in the last 18 months. So there's been 2 things at play, largely. So one is absent of tech. The president introduced a bunch of new rules to encourage retail purchases in the stock market, right? So that drove a big influx of capital. At the same time, of course, we've had this memory supercycle. And the Koreans have, big memory companies, predominantly SK Hynix and Samsung now. And so the stock market has been absolutely nuts in the last 18 months. It's gone from 2,500 up to 9,000. So 2,500 from April 25 up to 9,000 recently, and it's back down to 7,000, driven by the kind of sell-off, thinking that we are a little bit over our skis in memory and that actually the demand will cool off. It's kind of crazy. Like everything is wound so tightly at the moment. And this is not just in memory, it's across AI, which is the bar is set so high that actually even when you post good numbers, the stock can move in the opposite direction.
We've seen that a lot, haven't we? Yeah.
We just need to look at Samsung. So Samsung's Q2 operating profit in 2026 is something like 19 times higher than the operating profit from Q2 2025. It's absolutely nuts. And then at the same time, the stock went down 6%.
I thought it was more. What I saw, was it them or SK Hynix? 20, it was quite a chunk. Anyway, whatever.
But just to jump in briefly, Lomax, that's a great point, which is markets don't pay for record, like consistency, right? They pay for positive surprises. So when expectations are perfect, or when expectations are perfection, even perfection isn't enough. You've got to outsize it. Oh, you see what I did there?
One thing that Korea suffers from, which is both obviously good and bad, they live and die by this, is that 50% of the KOSPI, the main index, is basically dominated by these. It depends on how the companies are trading, but derived from Samsung and SK Hynix. So obviously the Mag 7 make up what, 30% of S&P 500, right? Something like that. Depends on obviously where you are.
Well, AI is roughly somewhere between 40 and 50%, depending on how you classify AI.
Okay, well, in Korea, it's more like 50, 60, right? So they kind of, if either of those companies catch a cold, then that really hits the Korean index. Is it back to your original question, like, is it cheap or is it not? Well, it all depends on what you think will happen to memory, because if you, given the earnings at the moment, the PE is actually incredibly cheap. It's literally like 5 to 6 times on these companies, right? So you could be like, well, this is like a sort of generational buying opportunity, or at least a very, very compelling buying opportunity if you think that the memory supercycle will last. If you think that those earnings are going to drop off a cliff with a lower demand in memory over the next 12, 24, 36 months, and of course that PE ratio is going to grow a lot, and it will look less cheap.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, SK Hynix has said the shortage is going to last until 2030, but the problem with that, I suppose, is every cycle's leaders say the cycle is different.
It's different this time, baby. It's always different this time.
Exactly.
No, but hang on. I mean, I think just also be careful we don't oversimplify it, because the PE is low and the forward PE is very, very low. And the question is not whether the cycle is going to turn. Of course it's going to turn. The question is when. And that could be a lot of money to be made for several years, right? The booms always very often go on for longer than people expect. And the whole question now is not whether the boom will end at some point. Of course it will.
Yep.
The question is whether it's we're at the top of the market now, or whether we have another 4, 5, 6 good quarters to go.
What I love about Mads is his consistency. Mads has been saying the same thing every show for the last, and I think it's great. You're totally right, Mads.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, it's simple from the perspective that shortage creates profits, and then profits create capacity, and then capacity destroys profits. So from that perspective, the cycle is simple. In the history of semiconductors is exactly that. So you're right, it is a timing question, but it is also actually quite simple.
I want to move into the main chunk of the show. It's our 100th episode, boys and girls. I am quite proud. Most podcasts don't make it past 10 or 20. We've done 100. Are we Joe Rogan? No, we are not. But do we have some loyal listeners that we get some great feedback from? And I hope you're still listening, and thank you so much for being with us. So 2 years and 4 days after episode 1, it was called The Seed. Sorry, Lomax, go.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, go.
No, I was going to say we're not quite Nigel Farage yet. We don't need to demand our own security or anything yet.
Well, it's going to come. We're going to get some big burly bodyguards down in Lisbon for you. It will come because there'll just be fans mobbing the outsized office. But it'll just take us some time. But back in the day, when we first started, this podcast was called The Seed. In episode 1, I had a look back. We were talking about LSE's listing rules, how expensive tokens were, some founder well-being stuff, and how global AI funding had doubled to 24 billion. And what a big deal it was. Oh, if only we knew. We're going to use this 100th episode as an excuse to look back 2 years, compare it to now, and then I'm going to ask us all, maybe not on the predictions crystal ball front, but just have a discussion as to how we think the next 12, 24 months is going to look. And to start up with, I'm going to look across the board, tech, ecosystem, some macro stuff, start with the US, and then look at Europe, UK, and then we can compare the two on some of the major bits. So S&P 500 was 5.6 2 years ago, 7.5 now, so up 34%. And just to note, compare that to the UK markets in a sec. US rates dropped from 5.5 to 3.5. US inflation, the CPI 3 to 3.5. It did peak at 4.2, and no doubt with Iran, there's going to be some more inflationary news relatively soon. In the States, roughly 650 unicorns in 24 versus 750 now. So not a major move. However, 90 minted in H1. H1 venture funding in the US was 400 billion, 87% of that to AI. That's nuts. Nvidia, 3.2 trillion then, valuation 5.1 now, up 60%. I thought that figure would be more. OpenAI was worth 60 bill 2 years ago. S1 filed and now worth around 850. That's a big chunk of change. Anthropic, 18.4 billion, now at 965 billion. Hyperscalers have roughly tripled capex from 240 in 2024, now looking to spend $680 billion now. So just a quick check-in with the room. Mads, anything that you'd highlight, low light, change, add in the US 2-year chunk?
I think it's been phenomenal and a fascinating ride. I mean, in some ways you could say everything's changed, right? You've got Anthropic is up 52 times in those 2 years. It's been a decent return for investors. CapEx is up massively. Chinese models were nowhere 2 years ago, or at least not in the public mind. They're always in development, but they have a massive market share now, right? It's over 60% or more of all open weight token usage. And then you have some places where nothing has changed. Bitcoin is flat as of 3 years ago.
Well, it doubled, right? I mean, we saw the 120s and then it fell off its perch.
Exactly. So it's exactly back where we were 3 years ago. I think it's +3 in comparison. Brent is flat, right? Oil is more or less where it was 2 years ago. Gilts have been stubborn. Still some of the same questions, right? Will all this lovely AI CapEx turn into revenue? And of course, we've seen some revenue, but is it profitable? And where's it going to show up? And will everybody win? And can it continue? And all that stuff. And the question is, exactly as it was 2 years ago, is it boom? Is it a bubble? Is it going to burst? And again, these are some of the same things we're talking about. So in some ways, everything's changed and nothing's changed.
Yeah, no, for sure. Andrew, any notes on the American chunk of data before we move on to UK, Europe?
Well, the biggest thing that changed is that Trump came back into power. Sort of a third of the way through when you started recording. It's 730 days or something since you started recording this, and he came in kind of a third of the way through that. So a lot of the changes and a lot of what we see now has been accelerated by him.
I think AI has saved him, right? I mean, can you imagine what his tenure would be had AI not propped up the markets? I mean, I don't know. It would all be very, very different politically for him.
That's probably true, but you also wonder how some of the other geopolitical trends would have been impacted. I mean, technology is now foreign policy, and has that been accelerated by Trump, or would it have been different? I think it was somewhat inevitable because of the power of the technology and what's involved, but I think it's been generally accelerated.
Lomax, anything on the American piece before we move into UK, Europe?
I've got some very high level things that I've just jotted down, and I think that kind of touch the US, but also Europe as well, but not specifically Europe, right? So just think about it. What's happened in 2 years? LLMs have just absolutely continued to smash it out of the park. And you can look at, you basically got $2 trillion companies now as the lighthouse companies. Yeah. That's phenomenal. At some point in 2024, you could have when is this going to end? Well, it hasn't ended. And all of the energy and oxygen largely has been taken out of the funding markets by those companies. And so the power law of those companies is insane, right? Obviously, we had the SpaceX IPO, the biggest IPO in the history of ever, 75 billion raise, 1.8 trillion valuation, and obviously went up to 2.5, 2.6. That would have been not inconceivable, but if you told us about that in 2024, we'd be like, okay, wow. I mean, there's a lot of things got to go right for that to happen. Hugely impressive. What we've seen high level is the segue now. You don't read it so much on the front pages, but we're seeing it in the venture markets. It's the segue now from, and you guys, I know, do a lot of this at Superseed, from AI to robotics, right? The move from to the software world to the physical world. You obviously got Jeff Bezos's Prometheus company now as one of the lighthouse companies in that segment in the US. So I do think that obviously we're seeing more and more rounds of industrial robotics. There's the whole way.
Well, we're going to talk later about the largest ever seed round in Germany exactly in this space, but we'll talk about that later.
Then you've got AVs have had an absolute moment over the last 2 years. Do you remember when the automated vehicles, right? Do you remember when robo-taxis and everything had a major winter about 4 or 5 years ago? In the last 2 years, they've come on leaps and bounds to the point where we now, as of this year, have them in Europe, right, for the first time, or at least in London. Obviously been rolled out more and more in the US. So that is becoming more and more of a thing. So that's stormed on. Biotech was absolutely dead 2 years ago and is actually, admittedly from a very, very low base, has been one of the best performing segments in the last 24 months, right? Slowly, a bit more oxygen being breathed into that market. We've just seen this deal we talked about earlier in psychedelics, but there's been a lot of M&A activity driven by GLP-1s. I mean, GLP-1s, what a story in 24 months, no? Absolutely outrageous. And that as GLP-1s, don't forget, yes, it's about getting fat people thin, but it's about a lot more than that. It's the first longevity drug. It's about cardiovascular health, which is the biggest killer of people. So ultimately, that is a huge story. The resilience trade is still absolute. And this is something that I was a little bit skeptical of, all of these VCs running around plowing money into defense companies, resilience companies. Like, that's got to end at some point. That has carried on, and the valuations now you're seeing in resilience companies, whether it's like pure defense or dual use or sovereign capabilities, is also insane, right?
It does depend on how you define some of these things. I mean, but kinetics aside, resilience could be so many things.
No, sure. I'm defining it very, very broadly. But if you look at like kinetics, I mean, I think a company that Andrew's invested in, to doff my cap to him, Castilian has like, raised fabulous amounts of money. We'll talk about Helsing a bit later. Obviously, Andural's now closing to 100 billion in valuation. Saronic now, the kind of Andural for the Navy, is a multi-decacorn, or at least a single decacorn. So ultimately, that trade in venture has really, really carried on. And then if you wanted to so that's all been like stuff moving up and to the right. Stuff that's either been flat or down is actually sort of outside of tech, but it's energy problems. And I know we're going to talk about Europe. Energy problems remain a major, major, major issue, right? Particularly in the space. So that's a big problem. And the other one is like the geopolitical risk, as Andrew alluded to, with Trump, has just been nuts in the last 2 years, no? And so obviously you had Trump come in, you've had Ukraine carry on, you've had Iran.
We've taken a lot of behavior for granted that is absolutely crazy. And I feel very strongly that we sometimes wake up, read the news cycle and just go, yeah, he's done this. And it's like there's some version of normality around it. We will look back on this in years to come and wince. I think this is just a lot of crazy time.
I don't know. I mean, you look forward, and now I'll shut up in a minute, but then suddenly you have the prospect of Le Pen getting in France, or do you know what I mean? Like, suddenly, I don't think this is necessarily going to end. Like, I sometimes feel like we sometimes felt some of this stuff might be a bit ephemeral, a bit temporal. None of the stuff that I've just talked about has actually appeared to be particularly ephemeral. Like, I know we're in a bit of a bull market, and I'm sure like things will cool off and some things will lose their kind of vogue status. But certainly, if you look back on 24 months since we started, it's actually been, I mean, we got lucky when we started the podcast, to be honest, because what a 24 months to cover, no?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when tech pre-Chat GPT was always a pretty slow news week. And for so many reasons, we have had some bumper topics each week to discuss. But listen, let me move into UK, Europe, because I never know whether to put the UK in Europe or not. But I'm just going to talk about Europe, and I am going to include the UK in that bucket. So FTSE 882, then 10.5 now, up 27%, which isn't crazy that far off the Yanks. The stocks, Europe 600, 524 then, 643 now, up 23%. UK 10-year gilts, 4 roughly then, nearly 5 now. BB base rate, 525 then, 3.75 now. UK inflation CPI, 2 to 2.8. So we haven't done that badly on the inflation side. European unicorns, 500 then, 717 now. Decacorns, maybe a handful, including Northvolt, which we can bypass, 11 now. H1 venture funding in Europe, 29 billion compared to 45 billion, up 53%. However, 10x smaller than the US, and we all know why. AI share of European VC was 18% 2 years ago. Now it's about 54%. I guess that depends on how you define an AI business. One business to highlight, Revolut, 45 billion then, 75 billion now. Good for them. Helsing raised at 5, now raising at 18 bill. Europe's share of global VC, 16% now. Sorry, 16% then, 8%, halved as absolute rose. So that's quite an interesting thing to maybe duck into. And as Mads, as you mentioned, Bitcoin from 60 to 60, roughly peaking at 125. And the Chinese open source, they have absolutely made some inroads. But we're going to talk later about whether they're going to continue to do that. But Mads, anything on the Euro side, highs, lows, good, bads, indifferent? How would you frame the Europe picture?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is that while the European venture market has really grown, as you outlined, in terms of the capital invested, in terms of the unicorns created, in terms of kind of all the good numbers we'd look at, the share of capital has still halved from 16 to 8%. And most of the gap is really down to 2 Silicon Valley companies, right? It's Anthropic and OpenAI that have been absorbing masses of capital.
Well, a lot of this is skewed. A lot of these figures are skewed by these mega deals, aren't they? So I think that has to be, and also the other thing that has to be taken into account is that a lot of the deals that we saw in Europe were actually American investors. And I don't know, we haven't quite covered that, and I don't know if we should, but carry on, Mads. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't. That's okay. You should. That's part of your job. And I think it's all good. But U.S. capital investing in Europe is fine, right? It's great. They're great opportunities. I think that just validates the quality of founders that are here. I think the test over the coming years will be to turn even more capital into productive companies. I think we're seeing that grow. We have been showing that Europe can produce lots of great unicorns, decacorns, as you're saying, are up. And now we need more capital.
That's my takeaway. My takeaway is we have absolutely proven that Europe deserves its place on the map with regards to the quality of founders and businesses. Whoever invests, wherever they end up, I think that has been, for the last 2 years, that's been my one key takeaway.
I mean, I think you're right. Europe's producing more champions, but we're still losing global market share. So like capital's coming back, more capital's coming in, but global relevancy for those companies, we're not there yet.
Andrew, don't you think that will change as we start moving away from hyperscaler focus and foundational focus into applications?
Well, first of all, that's a great question, is are we going to move away in any time soon from that foundational technology? I think for the near to medium term, the winners are still going to be those that can keep building and leapfrogging on the technology side. But another way to look at this is through the things that make this possible and make the ecosystem possible, because our winners got bigger, but as we've just talked about, the overall ecosystem, like comparative to what else is going on in the world, hasn't. I think Europe doesn't have a startup problem. To your point, Dan, we've got the smarts, we've got the founders, we're even starting to feel like to have their ambition, but we don't have a startup problem. We have a €1 trillion pension allocation problem. We're back to the hobby horse problem.
Lomax, AI went from 18 to 54% of European VC. Is that too much, you think, or too little? What's your broad kind of big picture take, and then maybe come back to the AI in Europe question?
The broad picture take is largely the same. It is largely similar to what you guys are saying, and very simplistically put by me now is, we in isolation in Europe look at the improvement in many of the metrics in terms of unicorns created, decacorns created, funding rounds, and then more subjective, like quality of founders and quality of projects and companies. And we think it's kind of improving by 25, 50% per year, whatever number you use. But the problem is that the goalpost has just been moved so far by what's gone on in the States, that it's if you take in the global context, and you talked about the number, European number of funding dropping, even though it went up 50%, it actually went from 16 to 8% as a proportion of global funding. It's it feels like technology, and I know Andrew kind of loves to sort of say, technology basically is everything. Like, technology is politics, like it is everything. And which is, and it's increasingly becoming the case. And so the turn of the wheel that we've just gone through in the last 3 to 4 years, driven by LLMs, but now going into, robotics and space tech and this new generation of hardware and energy technologies, Europe feels like it's missing the boat again. So I don't want to be a bear, and it is consistent, unfortunately, with the outside ventures thesis. Is unfortunately, I do worry that Europe is becoming a kind of emigrant thesis, which is that actually, yes, we're producing unbelievable people. That's better. And that's the one thing that all of us are consistently seeing on the ground. Better people are being drawn to entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurs themselves get better and better. And that is amazing. But I just feel it's very, very, very hard against the backdrop that we have of the sort of lack of ability to put risk capital to work in meaningful quantities. It's just we're kind of fighting this battle with an arm tied behind our back.
I'll take the other side of that. I don't think this mirrors what we see on the ground at all.
Okay, tell me.
If you go back 5 years, I'd absolutely agree with you that the route, the traffic was all one way. That the proportion of serious founders we see in Europe now saying we want to build in Europe has exploded. The amount of capital that's coming in has exploded. The amount of unicorns and decacorns that are being built. We had 8 new decacorns in 2 years. That's phenomenal. That's twice as much as we had in all history going up to those past 2 years.
Yeah.
No.
But when you look at-
I would totally take the other side of that. I don't think it at
Yeah,
all is
but
going the way
I
you say.
don't-
I think it's the opposite. I think we are seeing.
But
the
isn't it a
tide turning.
volume thing,
Pardon me?
Mads? But isn't Lomax's point that it's the volume and the speed of change?
Yeah,
a relative
my point is
issue.
obviously you've had 8 eudecacorns in Europe. How many eudecacorns have you had in the US in the corresponding period, right? So the goalpost just keeps moving.
Yeah.
If you want to create a decacorn company out of Europe, sure, it's easier to do it now than the past. But arguably, anyway, I don't like.
Can these companies stay European or can they stay UK? Are the government contracts going to come? You see the US moving ahead as it does on, and to Lomax's point, we don't seem to have a clear path ourselves. We seem to sort of belatedly copycat US strategy. And until political leaders understand that these foundational technologies, AI, SpaceX, quantum energy, are the only game in town, like we're going to still be in trouble. We're going to be a customer, not a builder. We won't catch up. And we need to be on a war footing for this. There needs to be, I think Lomax's urgency is absolutely right, because Mads, we've seen a great improvement, but improvement is not enough. And we tend to look at this, we tend to go, oh, but look how well we've done. Aren't we doing well? And it's like, it doesn't matter like whether internally we're doing well versus ourselves. What matters is whether we're doing well versus what's happening outside of Europe, and whether we're able to whether you believe that independent sovereignty is important or not, right?
So let's look at what the next 12, 24 months is going to look like, and how the world and Europe specifically will look in 2028.
Dan, can I just, because I've been very negative, right, on all of that. Can I just wrap up with a couple more positive things on?
Are you going to upside us? Upside us, baby.
I'm going to upside you on a couple of areas. One is, I think the Germans have really started to get it right in the context of defense. It's helped when they actually have money. With it's
just inertia, right? A lot of what we're talking about, I get the rate of change and that, but a lot of that is PR from the Yanks. A lot of that is we're going to spend $1 gazillion. A lot of that doesn't happen. So I don't want to conflate the PR from the American machine with the reality. I think that's quite dangerous to do. But crack on.
No, there's that, and then I would say also you look at things like what happened with Proxima Fusion, which has gone from basically a pre-seed startup to a $2.5 billion company with actual offtake or interesting arrangements with the German government in terms of future customer. That's pretty unheard of, and that's pretty cool. And if that happened, if that was magnified or multiplied 10 times across the continent, then that would be pretty awesome. So there are glimmers of hope.
There is a lot of money, and there is a lot of emotional money, and we can sense it in conversations that we're having. Not only is there a lot of new funds, new structures coming in across Europe, and a lot of change thinking, but there is a real drive across the continent to go, all right, we're going to do it now. And I feel, to your point, Andrew, there is a little bit, not war footing might be a bit strong, but there is a little bit of an FU footing, and I think that's going to carry. It's just a period of time. So let's do it. Let's talk about the next 2 years and companies, themes, topics. We can pick up on whatever we want. I'll start with my I picked out 3. We in our docket that obviously, listeners and viewers can't see, we've got maybe 15 line items of things that we could choose from that we thought were going to change from, market prices, specific companies, sectors, spaces, governments, whatever it might be. I've picked on Bitcoin, Apple and Google and SpaceX, just to pick 3. And I'm going to ask each of you to pick your sectors, spaces, things that you think are going to change for the better or for the worse, globally and for Europe over the next 2 years. So I reckon Bitcoin's on its way to 0. I don't think it will hit 0. I think there will always be the believers and the hodlers in there. But I think it's going to become structurally irrelevant. And I think by 28, it's going to be sub 20K. And that's probably the level we're going to bounce around at, where people are going to be looking for some kind of utility. But I reckon that's going to be happening relatively quickly by 28. I reckon, and I know you guys are going to punch me in the face for this one, but I reckon Apple and Google are going to win AI. Now, what do I mean by win AI? Because that's a very big statement. But I think they're going to show really strong lines by 28 of leading the AI war, if you want to call it that. Apple will absolutely own personal on device. I've been using the latest iOS 27 Siri, and I know at one point over the last 2 years, I've banged on it too much, but it is now at promise. Siri is now fulfilling the brand promise of being an incredibly useful assistant on my device. Is it still clumsy? Yes, it really is. But it does incredible sequencing. It offers incredible insight across my all the apps. Well, not the third party so much, but they're going to come. And I think they're going to own it. And I think they're going to become the gateway for everyone else as well. So Apple is going to own that gateway to the world for AI on the personal side. And I think Google's going to do the same on the enterprise. I think with their distribution, they're going to watch whatever's going on, and thank you very much for all of the insight, but they still own the mega chunk of distribution. And I think they're gonna win it. Not Microsoft. I think they're going to be doing Clippy and Copilot awfulness and continue to do that. I think Google are going to crush it. SpaceX, I think, will halve by Christmas, but bounce to list price by this time in 2028. I think they're not going to hit any of their sexy, cool things in the prospectus, but I do believe they're going to become critical sovereign infrastructure. I don't know what that will mean when there's a Democrat as the president in the US. I don't know how Elon is going to fit into that picture. That's going to be a really interesting grab your popcorn time. But I think SpaceX is going to absolutely take a bomb and then come back to being really critical sovereign infrastructure. So they were my three. Mads, did you want to go next?
Do any of your predictions by any chance have got anything to do with the fact that you love Apple and hate Bitcoin and hate Elon Musk?
Yes. I have
Dan
to project.
calls his run on Bitcoin market, tomorrow's headline.
I have to project. I remember losing to say, Trump isn't going to win the last one. I remember losing 100 quid to you, Mads, because you're like, nah, Trump's going to do it. I'm like, absolutely not. Project. I have to emotionally own this because I can't cope with a lot of this shit. Anyway, Mads, over to you.
Okay, well, we talked about pensions and we talked about the lack of capital. I think that in 2 years' time, it'll still be less than 2% of allocated to venture and other things. It is just going to be too much inertia, and it'll be too hard for them to figure out how to do it at a bigger scale. We said there'll be no AGI in 2026. I think that's certainly been right so far. 2028, I would say we are frighteningly close to some really, really smart models. Fable is scarily intelligent.
Unreasonably. I cannot believe. I mean, I'm so sad we're going to lose it in a couple of days, but I think I'm going to tune in anyway. But when I ask it to do things and whatever they are, it will often say, I don't think you meant that, Dan. I think you meant this. I think this is a smarter way of doing that. I'm like, oh my, I'm so sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's unreasonably smart. It's such a scary gift.
Right, and we are only 3.5 years into this. I mean, this is going to go so much further, and it still accelerates. It's exciting, and that's one of the reasons why I thought it's kind of the two bets, right? Anthropic and OpenAI, where they're going to sit 2 years from now. And I would say Anthropic feels like a fairly safe bet. It's going to be above the bill. OpenAI, I honestly don't know. I saw Sam, he was out with a tweet this morning saying, look, I know we had a bit of a shit show over the last year. The next year is going to be great, and here's why. And he outlined some of the stuff they've been doing and some of the stuff they're working on. Obviously.
Did you buy it?
Listen, he's a phenomenal founder and entrepreneur. He's got incredible technology, and he's right at the center of the most exciting and biggest tech revolution of history. So do I buy that there could be an interesting business? Absolutely. But there are pitfalls. So I honestly don't know which way it's going to go.
But it's great there's competition, right? It's great. And maybe Mira Marathi and the thinking, maybe there's other things that will come through. Who knows? But it's great that there's this. I mean, 5.6 and Fable, I think there's not that much different. I don't know enough, but it feels like there's this constant competitive tension, which is wonderful.
Yes, agreed.
Lomax, what would you pick up on? What's your take for the next two?
I got two that I'm kind of happy to pin my colors to the mast on, and then I had about 2 or 3 that I thought about that actually I don't really believe. So the ones that I'm happy to pin my colors to the mast on, which I know Dan you firmly do not believe, is that 2028 smart glasses are going to start to become a real thing, right? So
absolutely,
yeah. I'm gonna stick my neck out. They will start to become the form factor of the future. There will be. I don't know.
But hang on, Lomax, contextualize that. Where? For general compute, for everyday personal use? Contextualize it for us.
I think I'm very reluctant to go into. I don't know how it will play out, but I know that at the moment, none of us here are wearing smart glasses. But I'm pretty sure in 2 years' time, all of us will be, right?
On this pod?
Yes.
As in we will be wearing them, recording this podcast?
Probably, yeah, because they'll double up as our normal glasses. Well, I guess you two of you don't wear glasses, but yes. Okay, either on the pod or just as we off it. And I think a bunch of our friends will have them. I think, you know, that it's a combination of like the technology's improving, right? And there's still a lot of work going on behind the scenes at Meta to develop this. So that's my pretty firm prediction that I'm happy to stick by and die and you know, live and die by. The other one is quantum, and it's a difficult one because Andrew and I have a pretty good horse in the race here.
We've got the winning horse in the race.
Well,
there you go. Sell your book, baby.
But I'm now going to and you know, I think quantum's got a winter in it is the problem. And it's not due to like, it's not because I don't believe in the category. I feel like when you look at the valuations of the public companies now with IonQ at 25 billion, Quantinuum at 20 billion, D-Wave at 10 billion, in the private market, PsiQuantum, I think at 10 or 12 billion. None of these companies obviously have any real proper revenue. Like they still have a lot of major technical milestones to cross. So I do feel that there will be a rotation out of it, which will make, you know, Rigetti is now at 10 billion. And don't forget, we went through a quantum winter where D-Wave got recapped, Rigetti got recapped 5-6 years ago. I fear that we're going to go through another one again, which I really don't like, but it's probably going to happen within the next 24 months.
So what's the prediction for 28 in quantum?
Oh, just like, well, the listed stocks are down at the floor, basically. So
okay, so we're wintering. 28 is going to be quantum winter.
We're in the middle of winter. The things that I thought, the things that I thought about that actually I'm not going to pin I thought the resilience trade might start to unwind. I think that might happen if the Democrats get in, but that won't happen till late 28, beginning of 29, right? So I think that's a separate one. And I was sort of thinking, are all the vertical AI companies going to get crushed by Anthropic? You know, the Lagoras, the Harveys. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. The ones backed by good founders that have already got reputations and brands and customers, I think there's still more to play out in that arena. So I'm not going to call
really.
That. Yeah,
I think legal tech is going to take a battering.
No, I'm not talking about legal tech. I'm talking about like vertical AI companies, what you would call wrapper companies or something.
Yeah, okay. No, I was totally wrong. But I didn't think the whole wrapper side would last that long, and I was absolutely wrong.
I think elements will still persist. I think Anthropic need that. I think if they've built, particularly in regulated markets, if those companies have built, you know, positions of trust and they haven't totally fucked up overspent and overhired, there's a chance that they're still going to be real businesses come 24 months.
I wonder if there'll be like a Dolby stamp, like a powered by on the Anthropic on the vertical side. So they have their own apps. They're obviously building their foundationals, and they start doing partnerships with all the verticals. I wonder. Andrew, what would you pick up on?
Well, I'll take the quantum. I agree with Lomax. Slightly different perspective, which is I think there will be a shakeout in the quantum computing industry. I think there'll be a handful of companies release technology which demonstrates proof they can scale towards utility. And quantum utility, as a reminder, just means actually a quantum computer that can do something useful, because all of them are pretty academic at the moment. And I think many of the startups we've seen will struggle to prove the same. I think they'll come under, a lot of the startups that have been funded will come under great pressure to demonstrate that their technology, you can draw a line from their technology to solve the problems to get to quantum stability. So I think there'll be a bit of a shakeout will start happening. Mentioned earlier, tech is foreign policy. I don't think that's going away. The global economy is sort of splitting into competing technology blocks. And I think in 2028, the question as much will be not just whose is the best technology, but whose technology is it? Like, where is it coming from? You know, Lomax mentioned the power law, and I think, by 28, at least one of the biggest LLM money eaters may be in serious trouble. I think it'll be really interesting to see how these companies are able to continue to fund and power, both from a funding point of view, but from also an electrical power point of view, the demand. So we might see that actually the most valuable commodity might not be, oil or even data. It might be electricity, and every AI strategy for these companies ultimately becomes an energy strategy. And then finally, one of my favorite topics, but I think it is so important. I think that Europe and specifically the UK will sort of finally really internalize that strategic dependence on the US isn't a strategy, and that will feed into two particularly obvious areas. Well, three really. One, defense. Obviously, we're already seeing that. The second is that we'll recognize hopefully that Mistral alone in Europe isn't enough. We need another player.
You've always been a big proponent of that, haven't you?
Yeah, 100%. And I think also Europe will wake up, thirdly, belatedly, to how important space launch and access to space is. If you look at the number of launches in 2025, the US was, I think it was around 180 orbital launches. The whole of Europe managed 8. So, and I think just in terms of mass, that's about like, I think it was like 2,500 tons of stuff into orbit. Europe did like 140. In simple terms, that's a launch in the US like every 2 days. SpaceX is going to soon get down to every day. Europe manages, if it's lucky, every 2 months. Ariane 6 is quite a successful vehicle, but sort of old school in its approach. And the European Space Agency by 2027 has targeted like 10 launches a year. So it's an improvement, but it's still tiny compared with US capacity. And when
it also does depend what you're spitting up there, right?
Say again?
It does depend what you're spitting up there. I mean, if you look at, Falcon Heavy is spitting up Starlinks and stuff, but I mean, it's serving itself. I mean, SpaceX is serving itself. So I don't know how you compare. I don't know how you compare on the actual payload.
Because space has become more and more for everything from defense to indeed, internet access to communications to sensing, and in future to manufacturing. Lomax mentioned, the proliferation of new bio companies, and that there's a huge growth area in manufacturing for drugs in space. So, do
you buy into space data centers, Andrew?
I'm not an expert, but I suspect the problems will be solved that need to be solved. And guess what? Guess who's going to win? It's going to be who can get that stuff up there cheapest.
But that doesn't take into account the context of whether they're required in the first place. There is an assumption that this level of compute is required, and the cost and the function of space is a smart, efficient way of doing it, which I personally don't buy into just yet. But
it depends whether at a macro level you believe that the space economy and access to space is sort of an existential need, and I think it is. The satellites also don't last forever. Like all the satellites that are up there, and they need replacing. They have a half-life. They have a shelf life. Yeah. So the US is going to be very, very busy putting its own stuff up there. So what's your opinion?
I think Elon's he's just gone to the regulators to put up another 11,000, but it at much larger than the 2 tons that the existing Starlink boxes are. I think they're like 5 or 8 tons. So therefore he needs Starship to do that, and he hasn't got Starship yet. But this is going to be mega stuff. Mads, I can see you chomping at the bit here. Where did you want to go?
No, I think basically all we need for dancing behind the space economy is for Apple to launch a satellite, and then
all problems
just give
solved.
me a folding iPhone and I'll be happy. It's fine.
As you guys may have seen in the news, that a couple of weeks ago, SpaceX announced that they will no longer be taking, rideshare bookings on their transporter program from 20.
I did not see that. What does that mean in real money?
It's huge news. So if you're like a young startup or anyone who wants to put anything into space now, probably your only real bet is to go via SpaceX, right? And
yes,
companies we've invested in, and I'm sure you've invested in, use that process. There's a bit of a lead time. You've got to book it a while out. You've got to deliver the hardware 6 months before, etc. But they've now basically already fully booked up, I think, till the end of 2028, and they've now said they're not taking any more bookings going forwards because they want to, use it for their own stuff. That creates a major problem for startups that need to rely on that going forwards.
Opportunity, Lomax, opportunity.
Right, wait. Right, come on. You're so used to me being so negative. I was about to say, therein lies an opportunity. And if you've got your European hat on,
you've taken Andrew's mantle of being negative Nancy this week.
You've got ISAR and RFA, Rocket Factory Augsburg, and a bunch of other. Well, there's like 3 or 4 companies. One in Spain.
Well, the Chinese have started catching rockets. Okay, it was in a net, not in chopsticks, but they started catching rockets.
Oh no, but I'm talking about launch, right? So I'm talking about that of course, feeds into reusability, which feeds into the cost. Yeah. But ultimately, if Europe can get its skates on, there's an opportunity there. The problem is like getting the cost down, cost per kilo to launch, which SpaceX has managed to get, is going to be very, very hard in Europe.
Has Elon opened up like he did with Tesla? Are all of the patents open? I mean, is it just a case of we now know how to do it? Or is he not with SpaceX? I wonder.
It's a capability issue also. I mean, I think most of the even ISAR's stuff is like, so that it's 1 ton to LEO, right? It's not full access to orbit like with SpaceX. And it's not so much, I mean, obviously there's some high-end technology there, but it's the scale of the industrial machine that enables you to put a rocket up into space every day. And we're nowhere near that. We're absolutely nowhere near that in Europe. We're so far behind.
Let's crack down into deal of the week. Mads, what's your deal of the week?
It's a very exciting company called Valarian. We've been talking about Palantir and sovereign compute and sovereign technology, and where is the European variant? Turns out it's in Europe. They just had a $50 million Series A led by the Yankees, NEA. So even they can see there's a great opportunity there. Backstory is Max Buchan and Josh McLaughlin have founded the business. Background there, Josh was the COO. He was a special forces trooper. Then he went off to have 12 years at Palantir, where he sold a lot of their technology to customers before going off to launch Valarian here. So they also have Nick Trim, who is ex-Dark Trace. There's a bit of UK cyberbench forming there. And the story is they launched in 2020 as something completely different, kind of a secure messaging system nobody would switch to. But they then gradually moved more and more towards the kind of the Palantir model. And today they're delivering this technology to customers across 4 continents. The idea is to have a system that can work with your data, manage your data, provide AI layers and analysis capabilities. But it's cool.
So Palantir.
Yes, but it's sealed on your infrastructure. They hold no data. They hold no keys. You can run open models. It means you can use it for state secrets. You can run it and do as you want. So the whole idea is to create some of the anti-Palantir built by Europeans.
Governments must be dribbling. I'm sure Burnham will be chomping at the bit to buy.
I think NEA and the investors that backed the round are dribbling with excitement over how good an investment this is going to be.
Cool. Mine is Micro AGI. I think I'm saying that right. I was saying to Mads before the call, is it Microgi? Is it Micro Aggie? But I'm sure it's Micro AGI. $55 million seed round led by Hummingbird, North Zone, Local Globe, Village People. How funny. Village Global and Red Alpine. I'm sure they've heard that many times. The largest seed round in German history, which is why I wanted to highlight it and give them a big on the microphone. Lomax, you got one?
No, I would second Valerian. I think Max Buchan's a great founder. Second thing I would say, no, I just said it. Like Atai Beckley being acquired by Eli Lilly is an absolute monster deal.
Bada bing, bada boom. Andrew, you got a deal of the week?
Well, actually, you stole mine, so I'll second.
Sorry,
you on
dude.
Micro AGI, and I think what's interesting about that company
Microgi
is it's software only, and that's what I did. That's not that 55 million is not even for hardware, so they are helping, understand the physical world and feeding that capability back to people building robots. And we've said for a long time at 7% that robots really are now not a hardware problem; they are a software problem. It's a smart problem. Yeah. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, good for them. What's happening in the week ahead? I'm off to see The Odyssey. Obviously, the Nolan's had some great reviews, Mads, but on the more serious side, what's happening on the week ahead?
Serious, not serious, who knows? But we will have a new prime minister in the UK again.
Dun.
Exactly.
Number 7, lucky number 7.
Yeah. And of course, it'll be super interesting to see what will happen with the Mansion House pension agenda, what will be happening with the budget, with taxes, and all the other good stuff. We'll be watching out for Wednesday. So that's Monday. Wednesday next week, Alphabet will release their earnings. It's the first hyperscaler CapEx print after the verdict week we had this week. And they'll be providing an outlook for what they're going to be investing going forward. That's going to be very interesting. The Farnborough Air Show is on next week, the biggest in the 78-year history of the events, and this is sort of mid-rearmament, so there'll probably be lots of things coming out of that. SAP will also be announcing earnings. Will Europe's software bellwether be catching the IDM disease, or will it be powering ahead?
What do you reckon, Mads? What do you reckon if you're forced?
I think they'll do all right. I think it's a very different story. Tesla will be delivering news on their deliveries on Wednesday.
How much gamification is there? I always wonder, what's the discounting? What's the old stock? I wonder if there's a story behind the stock. I'm going to look into it for next week. There you go. That's my pleasure.
There you go. That's it. Week ahead.
While you guys were studying useful things at university, I majored in ancient Greek literature, especially the Odyssey. Well, I've actually read the Odyssey twice in ancient Greek. It took me
probably 2 months.
Such a smart
show off you.
I didn't go to university at all, so I definitely wasn't doing that.
And I did. And by the way, I did actually.
I didn't either.
I got a first in my Odyssey paper. So we're gonna have to like do an Odyssey deep dive, you know.
But does that mean you're going to go and see Nolan's Epic and then be disappointed? Does that mean because you know the source of truth?
I'll go with you, Lomax, if you like.
It's true. It's probably true. I'll be disappointed, but no, I can't.
You'll be like taking notes, sending Nolan some notes, will you?
In
Afterwards?
Greek.
I'll be disappointed. If it's not in ancient Greek, I won't. I'm not going.
You can do you can do a teardown, one of those YouTube teardowns.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw somebody complaining that there were no Greeks in it. I thought that was just hilarious.
Musk is complaining that there are too many. There are too many people who are not of the right color. Is that right? That's the latest debate. Musk
Is it? Oh, I thought
that.
it was a Greek thing. But what were they? What they weren't they Archelians? What they weren't Greeks then, were they? But they were called something else, weren't they?
Greek was at that point in time. Like, Greece wasn't as we know it. It was a series of kingdoms, right? And so
But weren't they called like the Archelians?
Odysseus is from Ithaca, an island called Ithaca. Just
something else. Listen, I'll trust you.
There's
more
no
than me
excuse for the wrong
Greek history.
skin color either, because these days you can just fix that in post, right? So
yeah, but then you get in a whole world of different other trouble, Andrew. So yeah. Boys and girls, thank you so much for chiming in. I really enjoyed that. And for those listening and watching, we will catch you all next week. I'm sorry.